educated, but I'm so frustrated. Hello to my loneliness. I guess that ignorance is bliss. Take me back to before the new. Rewind, take it out of cue. Innocence can be a young man's game. Signed up for the Hall of Shame.
Hey, sorry, that was a bit of a long introduction. I quite like that music. I got a bit carried away listening to it. It's almost a year now since I was invited to the press launch of the Royal Enfield SCRAM 411. Thoroughly enjoyable day. Then, a few weeks later they gave me one of the bikes for a week and I did some proper reviews. And then everything about the SCRAM seems to have sort of gone all quiet. I'll be honest, I don't know what the sales figures are for the SCRAM 411. They might be selling thousands a week, but it sort of seems to leave everyone a bit cold, which really surprised me. Now, I thought that this was a great little bike, but, reading through comments on various videos, every now and again, a little conversation between viewers crops up about the SCRAM 411. And I've come to the conclusion that for some strange reason, it must be the most underrated and underappreciated motorcycle in Royal Enfield's lineup. And at first, I really couldn't understand why. So I've done a little bit of investigation, a bit of digging around, to see if I can get to the bottom of it. Now, it's clear to me that in some ways the motorcycle press are to blame for some of this, and I'll get onto that in a few minutes. But first of all, I think possibly the main reason for the lack of love for this wonderful little motorcycle is a misunderstanding of what it is and what it's for. The SCRAM 411 is basically a stripped back Himalayan. And as far as Royal Enfield's history goes, and, the current lineup of machines, it's a bit of an oddball. The Himalayan, that is, not the SCRAM. The Himalayan is a do anything, go anywhere touring machine. It doesn't set the world on fire. It's a sensible bike that over the years has earned a lot of respect from a sort of a cult following of motorcyclists. Now, obviously, you can commute on a Himalayan if that's what you want to do, but what Royal Enfield decided to do with the SCRAM 11 was to produce a more street-biased urban commuter. I think it's fair to say that although, it's not completely lost its off-road ability, Royal Enfield's design brief was to produce a road-going motorcycle that could handle bad road surfaces. The sort of road surfaces that we're all used to in modern urban life that are sometimes a bit of a challenge for a sports bike or a normal roadster. What I'm trying to say is the target customer that Royal Enfield identified for the SCRAM 411 is not the sort of guy that goes motocrossing or grid laning every weekend. That's not what it was designed to do. The smaller front wheel allows for quicker, sharper handling, which is exactly what you need on the road, whilst retaining the capability of dealing with deep potholes and cobbled streets. That's what the SCRAM 411 is intended to do. Yeah, I've noted from some of the conversations in my comments section on videos, a lot of people think that it's a dedicated off-road machine, and that puts them off, but that's not what it is. I've seen a lot of conversations where one particular commenter has said, he really likes the look of the SCRAM, but he's not into off-roading, so if he was to get one, he would only be using it on the road, and that's a bit of a waste. Now, I don't know where that's come from. I don't know whether it's as a result of reviews here on YouTube that's given people that mindset. But if that's your mindset, you're the kind of person that this bike was designed for. You're exactly the sort of person that this bike was designed for. It's an off-road style motorcycle that does actually have an off-road pedigree, but it's been adapted to excel on the road. Now, the SCRAM isn't just a commuter, just like its sister, the Himalayan. It's going to be equally good at touring, or just for a run out with your mates at a weekend. It's less focused than the Himalayan, it's more of an all-rounder, a general purpose bike. There does seem to be this mindset these days that we have to pigeonhole motorcycles into certain categories. It's got to be one thing or another. It's got to be a street bike or it's got to be an off-roader. It can't be both. Well, the SCRAM is, and that's exactly what Royal Enfield intended it to be. I remember I was at the launch. Now, the other thing that keeps cropping up in these conversations is the engine and the gearbox, that it's a horrible vibratory engine and it's a nasty, sticky gearbox. Now, granted, a lot of the people that are writing these comments are just parroting things that they've heard elsewhere. I don't know where exactly, but clearly it's not from their own experience. I can tell you now, the single-cylinder engine in the SCRAM 411 is one of the sweetest, smoothest singles I've ever encountered. It's certainly comparable with the new J-Platform 350cc singles, and my experience of the gearbox is that it's just as good. Royal Enfield makes some of the best gearboxes in the business, and the SCRAM 411 is no exception. Now, the other thing that often comes into the conversations is that, because it's a low-powered motorcycle, it's no good on motorways. I found it to be quite the contrary to that. In fact, I made an entire video sort of detailing my experience of this bike using it on the motorway. Now, the bike has, I think, a top speed of about 80 miles per hour. I've got to admit, had it up that high when I was testing the bike, but I did take it for some extended trips on the motorway just to sort of ascertain and to prove in the reviews that it was a capable motorway bike. Now, I think the big problem is, especially with some of the old timers, you get the mindset that a low powered bike travelling at high speed is revving its nuts off. It's not designed to be doing that. So using it that way long term is going to be detrimental to the bike. That is an outdated mindset. Theoretically, a 410cc motorcycle, even a single, should be capable of travelling a lot faster than this bike actually does. But because of emissions regulations, these bikes are governed, which means that at 70 miles an hour the bike isn't running at its limit or near to its limit. It means that it's just running near to the speed or terminal speed that it's been set to. One characteristic of Royal Enfield motorcycles, or certainly the singles, is that the faster you go, the smoother and the sweeter the engine runs. As I've already said, the engine on this bike doesn't really vibrate, but it actually exhibits the least amount of vibration at the 70 mile an hour mark. So rest assured, it can do that all day, every day if necessary, without any detrimental effects to the bike. So that's the main sort of urban myths about this motorcycle that seem to put people off. And as I've said, I've got no idea where some of those myths have come from, about the engine and the gearbox. And clearly the overall styling of this bike has put some people off because, they don't think it's designed for their intended purpose. And of course the motorway high-speed riding thing is just a carryover from days gone by, really. I certainly had no issues with this motorcycle on the motorway. Now, other than those things, there were some issues with the brakes that people keep talking about, and I had to dig a little bit deeper to get to the bottom of this because I found the brakes to be absolutely fine.
It's always hard at first glance.
Now, I don't read motorcycle magazines because, to be quite honest, they just annoy me. And I've made videos covering this subject in the past. For the most part, these journalists that work for motorcycle magazines devote most of the review to stroking their own egos than actually honestly reviewing the bike itself. Now, on the day of the launch, you had little stops every now and again for refreshments and a bit of a break, and I was talking to one journalist who sort of, told me that in his opinion the brakes were underpowered. I let him know that I disagreed with him, and that I thought the brakes were perfectly fine, and I think it just mystified him. Now, at first, it didn't really click with me who this guy was. At the beginning of the day, at the original sort of presentation, obviously these rides were led by guides. And we were specifically asked not to overtake each other, for safety reasons and to make sure that the group sort of stayed together. And we were told on no uncertain terms not to overtake the guide, because then you wouldn't know where you were going. This particular journalist was one of 2 or 3 journalists who just spent the entire ride sort of overtaking anything that got in front of them. The type of rider that I've spoken about before in previous videos, impatient riders. If there's something in front of them, they've got to overtake him. It hadn't sort of dawned on them that once they reached the leader, they couldn't overtake anymore, but they just continued doing it throughout the day, and it actually became rather annoying by the end of the day. A nice bloke, but his riding skills left a lot to be desired, especially from a safety point of view. Again, I've made videos about this, underpowered brakes, and it's something that I constantly see parroted regarding this bike and other bikes in the comment section of various videos. In fact, I made an entire video sort of covering this subject the other week about why brakes are set up the way they are. Now, I knew that these sort of complaints have very likely come from some sort of motorcycle publication. They invariably do. So I did a quick Google, and I'm literally going to tell you about the first 2 reviews that popped up. I've not selected these specifically, but there's one from Bennett's Bike Social and one review from the infamous MCN. Now, we'll start with, and I'm just selecting one point about the brakes from Bennett's. Bennett's are an insurance company. In my opinion, they should have just stuck to insurance. Now, bearing in mind that the maximum permitted speed on any road in the UK is 70 miles per hour. He reported that at 80 miles an hour, the handling becomes loose. Something I never experienced because I never took it over the legal speed limit in the UK. I think it was the hypocrisy of this that hit me. This is an insurance company that has decided it might get a few more customers if it builds up a relationship through journalism. And in this article, this company is condoning breaking the speed limit. And let's face it, as an insurance company, if you had an accident and admitted to them that you were speeding, they would tell you that your insurance was void because you were breaking the law. But I'm afraid this is the mentality of motorcycle journalism. Now, it goes on to say that, travelling at those speeds, basically the brakes are not up to the job. I mean, the questions that are going through my head after reading that statement is, why did he need to be travelling at 80 miles an hour when the speed limit, presumably it was on a motorway or a dual carriageway, is 70 miles an hour? And then what emergency befell him that he had to put the brakes to the ultimate test at that speed and found them to be lacking? His observations about this bike clearly are born from irresponsible, dangerous riding. They're not the fault of the bike. Now, with the Motorcycle News article, the journalist took things a step further, testing the brakes, complaining that despite numerous attempts, he was unable to activate the brakes hard enough to activate the ABS. Seriously, that was his modus operandi for brake testing. Now, that actually tells me that the ABS and the braking system have been calibrated absolutely spot on, because the ABS is an emergency feature and it shouldn't activate unless you've effectively lost control of the motorcycle. ABS is actually designed to help you regain control of the motorcycle once you've lost it. But again, this is motorcycle journalism. This is what they do. And this is what gives motorcycles a bad reputation. The intellectually challenged read these articles and come away with the impression that the brakes are faulty or they're not up to standard, when in actual fact they are. And then Chinese whispers kicks in and it gets around that the bikes are below standard, which is unfair to the motorcycle and it's unfair to the motorcycle manufacturer. I found the brakes on the SCRAM 411 to be more than adequate for normal riding, and I dare say they would equip themselves well in an emergency situation. I mean, riding in a group, there were one or two occasions where I had to brake a little bit harder than I would normally like to, and they handled it fine. Putting them to ridiculous, unrealistic tests that prove nothing do just that, they prove nothing, other than the journalist could probably do with some sort of riding course. And as for Bennett's, in my mind, it's a company that should be promoting road safety, not revelling in a gratuitous disregard for the law. Now, those are the main points that I find keep cropping up about the SCRAM. Myths and legends, really, that seem to put people off this bike when actually it might be the ideal bike for them. It's not a perfect bike, you know, it's a budget bike built down to a price, but I tell you what, it's bloody good value for money. So if this bike happens to be a bike that was once on your radar but you were put off by disinformation, take my advice, look at it again, take one for a test ride and make your own mind up. In fact, my advice is take any motorcycle review, even mine, with a pinch of salt. Don't fully base your purchasing decisions on the word of someone else. Always go and try them out for yourself rather than, you know, just taking notice of myth and disinformation. Right, once again, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this and my other videos, and in doing so helping to support this channel. You know I appreciate it. I would also appreciate it if you would leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you're not already a subscriber, hit the notification bell and ensure that your notifications are enabled on your YouTube account. That way you'll be informed whenever I upload a new video. I will of course be back next week, so until then, please ride safely and I'll see you soon.